Welcome back, everybody, to the Florida Band Podcast. My name is Andrew Lopez. I'm the band director at Coniston Middle School in West Palm Beach.
And I'm AJ Arcia, band director at Coral Springs Middle School in Coral Springs, Florida.
I'm Christian Gordon, band director at Westglades Middle School in Parkland, Florida.
And with us today, I didn't announce it to Christian and AJ. We brought in a buddy of ours who's a band director in Franklin County High School in Franklin County, Georgia, way up in the northern part of Georgia. Chris Sampson, what's up, dude?
Hey.
He lives in the boonies, and so his reception is terrible, but that's okay.
Yes.
It's taken us 38 minutes to start recording.
Because
I have the best
not just because of
internet you can
Chris.
get in my town, and it is 15 megabits per second.
Jesus Christ.
But not only did Chris join us, surprisingly, good surprise, but AJ also showed up to my house when we were supposed to record remotely today, but it's all right.
Like I logged in.
I wanted to see you.
If mine and AJ's sound is a little off today, that's why.
I logged into Discord and I was like, is that AJ? And he goes, yeah, AJ. I was like, but why though?
I know, but then at the same time, you bring in Chris without telling us, and I'm like, but why though?
Yeah.
But that's okay.
A lot of chaos today. That's okay.
My fiance is out there eating cake with my cat.
Dude, that cake.
Oh my gosh.
Cake's so good.
Yeah?
Friggin'.
She's having cake for breakfast.
Heck yeah.
All right, so here we are.
So it's how you guys doing? I mean, like Chris, it's funny. I'm looking at Chris through the Discord, and all I see is just the top of his head. How you doing, Chris?
The most beautiful part.
I'm doing all right. We just finished up our football season this past Friday. Not yesterday Friday, but Friday the 4th. My team went 0-10 all season. We scored four touchdowns all season, and none of them were at home. And we had just passed a bond, and we spent over $1 million renovating our football stadium.
Only in Georgia. Only in Georgia.
Oh my God.
Oh no. Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, so we got a brand new scoreboard, video scoreboard in like super high def. We got LED lighting. We got super high crisp audio, and 0 touchdowns scored. But I do love my football coach.
All caught in 4K.
My football coach really is a really great guy. It's a rebuilding year for him, big time.
Sure. But I mean, hey man, the band never loses. So, and you can think of it as they just spent all that money on a brand new venue for your program.
Yes, because we are going to be hosting a marching band competition next school year.
Is it turf?
Yes, it's turf.
Hell yeah.
And it's the, between drum corps and college, I've been on turf fields all over the country, and it is definitely one of the best ones.
That'll be really cool.
Nice.
You could potentially reach out to some of the local corps like Crown or Spirit and have them maybe a housing site.
Yeah, we actually, a couple years ago, we had Jersey Surf for a day or so when they were doing one of the shows in Georgia. And then actually, a buddy of mine who runs Infinity Percussion is going to have them stay here in the spring.
Oh, Mike?
Yeah.
Dope. That'll be fun. Cool. Yeah. Well, I dig it. I'm glad you're here, and like I said, the band never loses. AJ, how you been, man? Driving over to Christian's house. How's it going?
Well, I went AWOL for like the last day.
Yeah, what you been doing?
Yeah, dude.
I was actually doing a lot of yard work outside. Hitting up Home Depot and such.
You got a new place.
Yeah, we did.
New apartment.
Yep. So we just want to spruce it up a little bit.
Don't go to Home Depot.
More hours. What?
Don't go to Home Depot.
Don't, no. Dude. We can't get sued. Don't. We'll go. We'll next episode. All right.
But yeah, I've been doing that. But we mentioned it before in our recording.
Our initial recording.
I feel like this is the second time we've recorded that we've had a hurricane come through and we've had to miss school.
Yeah.
And we've practically missed this entire week of school with the exception of Monday. And that's
you guys didn't have school on Friday?
A week.
No,
we didn't have school on Friday.
We have off for Veterans Day, and then Tuesday was a work day, And the hurricane hit, late Tuesday, early Wednesday, so they canceled school Wednesday, Thursday. So we literally only worked on Monday.
Jesus
Yep.
Christ.
But then, like, it was so weird. They told us on Tuesday that there was no school Wednesday, and then on Wednesday they told us there was no school on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like one of those things where it's like, I appreciate it, but at the same time I don't, for the sake of continuity with the kids, because on Thursday it was beautiful weather outside. I mean, it was fine.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you just gotta roll with the flow, and it's gonna be 1 week tomorrow since we last saw the kids. I know that Christian had a Veterans Day performance, but that wasn't all your kids.
No.
Yeah.
But
for me, sorry, looking at my cat out there. He's being silly. For me, so last time we recorded, I was out of town, seeing family, taking care of some family stuff, and I missed 7 days of school. I was gone for like 9 or 10 days, maybe 11 days. So 7 days of school, and then I come back and I try to get everything back in the groove, back into a flow, and then then the hurricane comes. So much needed time off personally, but yeah, this is about to be a nightmare because we have a concert in a month, and so God willing, we'll have a really good week this coming week, and then Thanksgiving break, we're off for a week, and then we come back, and then we got like maybe 2 weeks plus testing,
Yeah.
and then a concert, and then a parade, and then Universal, and then light up the park. And anyway,
That's a lot.
So that's where I'm at.
I mean,
because I'm already pre-stressing about all this stuff. Just trying to close the gap between now and winter break.
It'll be what it'll be.
yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I had school on Friday, but that was just, we had school on Monday, hurricane, teacher work down, voting day. And then we had Friday, which, like, I'm glad I got to see them because, for the beginners, we were able to, review rhythms. We reviewed chart 9, got them on 9.5, and, was able to have some sort of consistent routine, which I know is not a thing for any of us at the moment. But, the veterans just did pass off time because I'm like, anything I work with you right now, we're gonna have to redo it on Monday anyway, because since we had school on Friday but no school for the rest of the week, a lot of kids didn't show up because that's the climate we work in.
Oh yeah, you might as well just stay home on the Friday. Yep.
Yeah, so we just did pass off time for the kids that were there, and continued forward. It's been this week's been easier than past couple weeks because we got our AC back, we got our fridge back up. Marissa's gotten over the hump of grad school in terms of load of assignments, so it's been a little bit it was an easier week. It was nice to have time off, but like, same thing, I just like, my kids are like, Mr. Lopez, you look like you don't want to be here, and I'm like, I do though. I want to be here. I want to teach. I want you guys to get better. I want us to have fun. So that's really been it. But like, other than that, it's whatever, man. Today what we're doing is we're recapping Fundies Part 2 because I think we missed a couple of things on Box 2. So we're going to cover Box 2, but, to recap for Fundies Part 1 and Part 2, what we did, we discussed the rest of Box 1, which is band sonority and the concept of resonance. We spoke about physical articulation. We all three of us pretty much agreed on how we go about it, but when we shared our different takes on how to create consistent articulation, we talked the importance of literacy. We sort of hit on tempo with Christian, but we were really mainly talking about the idea of precision and lining things up in many different ways. Entrances, releases, and then clarity of articulation. So it's just mainly most of that stuff. If you want to go listen to Fundies Part 2. We hit a lot of that stuff pretty nail on the head, and we're pretty consistent throughout. But we're continuing with Box 2, and we're going to finish Box 2 today. The first thing that we have is the concept of technique. AJ, what do you have?
Honestly, this is just the epitome of everything in Box 2, I think, in my opinion. You have to have all these, fundamentals that we've talked about in box 1 to, contribute to box 2. So with technique, honestly, I don't really have anything other than just thinking about all the things that you have to do to be technically prepared for box 2. So you got to have note accuracy, rhythmic accuracy, precision, entrances, releases, interpretive articulation, and clarity of articulation. And even beyond that, right after technique, we have stability of pulse, dynamics observed, and transitions. So with technique, with the students, you got to tell them that you got to be firing on all cylinders, and that's pretty much it for me.
Sure. What about you, Christian?
My initial thought as AJ started talking was, I wonder if the judges are physically looking at, or if judges physically look at your ensemble. I wonder if they're looking at hand position. I wonder if they're looking at students' embouchures.
Some do, some don't.
Their postures and stuff, and they judge technique based off of that. That makes me curious.
I will say, I did have a judge come up to me last MPA and comment about how the ensemble looked.
Mm-hmm.
So I can say that I think that does happen, but like Andrew said, it might happen from judge to judge.
Some do, some don't.
So they might be. They might also, when I think of technique, I think of are the brass whenever they have slurs and they're partial slurs. I wonder like if they judge based on how they sound, and more scale-based passages in the music, if they judge based on that, like is it even rhythmic wise, or technique, how's your articulation, how does it sound rhythmically, things like that, just sounding more professional in how the students perform. So and it basically it is your technique allowing the music to speak the way it should come across to the audience, or is it hindering that?
Yeah. Chris, what about you?
So, being a Georgia person now, I haven't looked at this FBA sheet in a couple years. And the Georgia sheet looks very similar to it. And I remember back being in Florida looking at the sheet a lot. To me, technique, kind of like what AJ said, that's like bridging all of them together. And technique to me approaches the physicality of playing. That's something I have to work with my kids a lot on. Like you said about looking at the hand positions. I know we're working on a piece for our Christmas concert coming up, and I had one of my clarinet girls up front trying to play B and C sharp, both on the right pinky, and it's in a 16th note run. And I just had to look at her and go like, listen, you cannot possibly move your pinky fast enough to get B, C sharp going out. And similarly to me, if I was judging and I'm looking at technique, that's going to be the, are the students arranged in that they can see the conductor and their music without having to adjust themselves too much? Are they having good body posture and all those kind of things? Because as you look through all 3 boxes of the sheet, all that kind of stuff is not actually listed. So to me, the technique is going to be that physical preparation.
I agree. I explain to my kids a lot. The technique is how your fingers are moving. Technique, it's Christian hit on it too. It's how your embouchure is. As a brass player, how versatile and how flexible is your embouchure in the places where it's needed. Where in the places where it's needed is subjective, because it depends on how you as a judge or you as a musician view how hard or easy your technical passages are. But typically when I tell the kids, like when you're speaking to a musician and you say, hey, check out that technical passage or the technical etude, that usually involves dexterity, and that involves embouchure strength, and that involves the physical movement, like Chris said. So I tell my students, when we're talking about technique is how you move. It's simply how you move to interact with how you play. And judges can't always see your technique. Like they can't, there's no way to physically look at every clarinet's hand position. But Chris was right, where you can hear bad finger technique, let's say let's say we're playing a slow piece, right? And you're going from G in a clarinet, G, A, B natural, C. You'll be able to tell how good their technique is on their fingers if they struggle to get through the break. They might get through it, but if there's a delay or you hear extra notes, like that's technique. And that's usually that's the example that I use, because every clarinet in the room, and most people can immediately figure that out. And then students in the room were in the room when the clarinets were learning to go over the break in 6th grade. So everybody knows. But that's usually how I do it, is the physicality, for sure. Next up is stability of pulse. What do you got, Christian?
Yeah, stability of pulse. So yeah, I did touch on this on the last episode a little bit. For me, it's metronome practice. So I know the three of us use teaching rhythm logically, and the first thing they teach. Okay, the four of us do, which is wonderful. And the first or second thing they teach is the pulse.
Yeah.
And how to get your students to pulse. And that's basically when they tap their foot with the metronome, the down and the up. The up is the pulse. Down, up, 1, tay, 2, tay. That's the pulse. And so we teach pulse from day one. And but ways that we can continue to master that, I just use a lot of tricks with the harmony director. So when we start out, I'll put the tempo on, like, I'll put the metronome to click on every beat, or on eighth notes, and go from there. Then I take the eighth notes away. Then I'll have the metronome set to halftime, so there's only a click every other beat. Or if it's in 3/4, then we might do a click, 1 per measure. Even in a 4/4 or 2/4 time, I'll do 1 per measure sometimes. And then what's really cool is I make sure all the students are keeping the beat in their body somewhere. If it's not going to be with their toe, because they get ignorant as they get older and they don't want to tap their toe, at least they should be moving or feeling the pulse in their body somewhere, because it's really important that they do that. Have them play with their eyes closed helps a lot. Have them play from memory helps a lot. Maintaining tempo. Another thing I'll do is I'll start the metronome, and then I'll turn the volume down, but the metronome's still going, and then turn the volume back up randomly and see if the students are still playing in time, if they're maintaining that steady pulse. And that's everything I've got for that. How about you, Andrew?
A lot of similar stuff. Stability of pulse. I tell it's physical. It's very physical. Like, you have to feel the bodies. You have to feel the time somewhere. And we do a lot on Met, and then we do a lot of weaning off Met. I'd also do a lot of the experimentation with the harmony director, mixing different types of meters, making sure that they're not relying on it too much. I do like the memorization part, because when you think about it, once they memorize the music, you're able to hit on box 3. And you're able to hit on other things because you're not focused on the what's on the page. So I do enjoy that idea. I'm probably going to steal that. But it's a lot of stability pulse is just tap the dang foot. Like, I tell the kids, I'm like, I'm 29 years old. I've been playing music for 17 years. Tap your foot. You're not like, just tap your foot. Just tap your foot. It's not a discussion. Just tap the foot. Feel the pulse. Musicians can keep steady time. You need to be able to keep a steady time. Tap your foot. And then the different, metronome tricks helps a lot as well.
AJ, what you got?
I usually harp on pulse in a way that tells the kids that even if they play something right, like notes and rhythm, if they're playing it out of time, it's going to be a wrong note. So they have to stay in time. And so from the very get-go...
Dr. Port says the right note on the wrong beat is a wrong note. It's
still a wrong note. Mm-hmm. So you have to harp on the fact that in order, like what Andrew said, in order to be a musician, you have to be in time. And that sometimes, I have a flute girl who will put a metronome on her stand, but just not listen to it. Mm-hmm. And it's like every time I hear her, I have to go up to her and I have to say, you have to listen to this. And I tell them, we're humans. We make errors all the time. We're imperfect. but this is a machine designed to stay in time, and it will never be wrong.
The metronome is the revealer of truth.
Yes. And they look at me like I just spoke a different language. But I test them all the time in class if we're going through a piece or if we're going through the book or whatever it is, a technique builder or rhythm charts. And number one, I have to make sure that they're tapping their toe or their foot. But then I go ahead and I ask them, and I go, if, God forbid, they speed up or slow down. I double check that they can use their ears and listen to what just happened. And I want them to pay attention to that as well. So the stability of pulse thing also requires a sense of awareness, listening awareness. So you have to make sure that they're always listening, they're tapping their toe, and then that will give you almost like a springboard to slowly start taking away a metronome from practice or rehearsal, getting them to get their eyes up and looking at you. But that only comes with lots of practice on the metronome, lots of practice with tapping your toe, and just repetition, so that way they have that internal pulse.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to get. The stability of pulse is really have you instilled a sense of internal pulse so that they can look at you and maybe look back down at their music and keep in their head the same beat. They'll look up at you at every measure or so. But realistically, for me, that stability of pulse starts from the very, very first day of beginning band and continues all the way through your musical career. So for me, it's a gradual step towards that internal pulse.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
how can
Cool.
you achieve internal pulse?
Chris, what you got?
So it's really interesting listening to the three of you because for the listeners at home, in case you didn't catch, I'm a high school teacher. And so obviously y'all three are middle school teachers. So I have a bit of a different perspective, but something I started this year was actually have a beginning band class at the high school. So I'm both trying to push these skills up to like a very high performance level and establish them from the beginning. And Christian, I really loved the playing with your eyes closed. I've never done that, and I'm definitely going to be doing that on Monday with my kids.
Yeah.
Like all of you said, I definitely do a lot with the metronome stuff between tonal energy and the harmony director. One of the ones that I always do with my ninth graders, usually sometime in the first 2-3 months, is I'll pull out a really slow piece. I mean, like quarter note equals 60, maybe 72. And they always struggle counting through those long notes. And so I'll set on the harmony director, on the tonal energy, I'll set it to be like 12/4. Let's say it's a 12 count whole note that they're holding out. I'll set it to 12/4 time, and I'll cut out the quarter note, just the accent at the top. So let's see if they can go 1 all the way until they get to count 12. And then I'll have them like add a quarter note on beat 1 or beat 13, however you want to think about it. And that really struggles with them. Or I'll just have them clap it too. And I usually start that at a slightly more digestible tempo, somewhere in like the 80s, 90s, 100s. And that usually helps a lot. But actually, none of you have said the magic word that my band directors always drove into my head, which was subdivision, right? And so with all stability to pulse, regardless if we're talking about a fast tempo, medium tempo, slow tempo, whatever, it's all about subdividing, your eighth notes or your triplets or your 16th notes. We're playing a piece right now that's, for most of my kids, the first time they've ever looked at a triple time signature, 6/8, 9/8, 12/8 type stuff, and trying to get them to feel that triplet pattern just is, it is a huge struggle. And so I take, kind of like how Darcy described taking so I use Foundations of Superior Performance, the blue book. And
Love that book.
Yeah, and so I took what she said in one of her episodes about taking the articulation study and breaking it down, and the triplet is the one that my kids always struggle with, especially my drummers. And so we really harp on that one, just getting them to understand the triple meter subdivision. So a lot of stability of pulse comes from, y'all were saying it, like externalizing the beat, which I have to get my kids to stop stomping their boots. I'm telling them we're not doing Cotton Eye Joe.
Stomping their boots.
Yeah, yes, sir. So I tell them to tap their toe inside their shoe, and that usually helps a lot. But also just getting them to understand like that 8th note subdivision or that triplet subdivision, or in some cases the 16th note subdivision, depending on what kind of piece we're playing.
Sure.
The one that sticks out to me the most was, we did it 3-4 years ago. It's a really great. It's "Sheep May Safely Graze" from Bach, and I think it's Alfred Reed did the arrangement, and that's at like quarter note equals 58. And I remember my all-state clarinet girl sitting up front just could not get the subdivision going on at that slow of a tempo, because it's written in almost like half time. So like what we would expect to normally be a half note is written as like a whole note or something. It was crazy slow. And I live for the subdivision. So I think also, with that, exposing them to those slow pieces where they have no other choice but to subdivide is going to really help your sense of pulse.
Sure. I think, Christian, last thing on stability of pulse, then we got to move on. But Christian, you've mentioned before how your opinions on 101 rhythmic rest patterns, for the purpose of stability of pulse, it does have its effect, because for the same reason, counting through a long note has the same problems as counting through a rest. And if you can count through silence in time, you're in time. And that book is great for developing the concept of stability of pulse. It has different purposes. Some people like it for teaching rhythms. So I don't use it to teach rhythms. I use it mainly just for the stability of pulse and making sure they know how to count in time, not just count in general, but count in time.
You use it to practice rhythms.
Yeah. That's one way to do it.
I think the book is great for that.
Yeah.
No, my only gripe with that book is the pacing.
Sure. But
if you're using it to practice rhythms, like they already have a good foundational knowledge of rhythmic patterns, then I think that's a great book.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was going to say about stability of pulse, I had a thought that actually goes with precision. Oh, but first, Samson. So we did not use, I called you Samson, Chris. We did not use the word subdivision, but we did talk about subdivision because we say pulse.
It's the same concept.
But you're correct. We need to be using that word. So thank you for that.
I was going to say that we do that.
Yeah.
Because we automatically subdivide the beat into 8th notes.
Right.
With our pulses.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we have the kids do the up and down motion with their pulse or their voice. And that simulates that subdivision. Yeah. And eventually I tell them, we tell them that it's an 8th note.
So what I was going to say is another exercise is, Chris, you kind of reminded me of this when you were talking about your ideas, was where you like count the kids off and you tell them, okay, everyone clap together on count 13.
Yep.
1, 2, ready, go. And then see if they can clap together. And that's a really tricky way to practice precision.
Yeah. So for dynamics observed, I'm going to go more in depth when we get into box 3. I'd like to talk about the shaping expressive part, because that I use dynamics as the main force to drive that concept. But for basic dynamics observed, first off, teach dynamics right away. Like it's whether they, as they're still developing their tones, loud and soft is a thing. So you can teach them to be loud, and you can teach them to be soft, and just getting them contrast. And the sooner you get the contrast, the sooner you'll be able to observe dynamics more effectively. Something that I like to do, and a lot of band directors do this, is you put the dynamics on a range of 1 to 10. I tell them 10 is the red zone. You do not drive into the 10, because 10 is as loud as you can play, but as loud as you can play is with a bad sound. So don't go to 10. And then I'll put 9 at fortissimo, 7 to 8 is forte, 5 to 6 is mezzo, forte, and then we go down all the way down to pianissimo, which is at a 2. And then somewhere between 2 to 1. And then, we just basically what we'll do is I'll have the kids, before we start practicing before we start refining the dynamics in a piece of music, I tell them, make sure when you're simulating your music with your chiseling, chiseling, air playing, sizzling, counting, tawing, dying, who cares? As long as while you're simulating your music in the sight reading process, incorporate dynamics into your chiseling. Chisel out a piano, chisel a crescendo, chisel it forte. Just to get them practicing that stuff right away, because a lot of times sometimes band directors will be like, all right, we're going to get all the notes and the rhythms on the page. All right, now it's time to do dynamics. Well, they've already played all of their music 40 times without dynamics. So now you're having to reteach the music with dynamics, or you could just teach the music with dynamics the first time, kind of thing. And then just making sure the word I use for the kids when we're talking about dynamics is obvious. Is what you're playing obviously forte? Is your crescendo obvious? How to do a crescendo, we can get into that later, because that's not really dynamics observed. Dynamics observed is a yes or no question, but is it obvious? And if it's not, and the kids know, you can ask them, hey, was that obvious? Was there an obvious difference in dynamics? They'll go, no. And I'm like, so then do it, and then make it more obvious in both directions. And then obviously the whole bit of if the softer your softs are, the more effective your louds are without blowing past a good sound. I think we could really dive into dynamics more specifically in box 3, because the dynamics is what really makes the expressive nature of box 3 so effective. But for basic, are you observing dynamics? Yeah, you teach them yes or no, and you teach them to scale and make it obvious.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I would say as well. The box 2, just box 2 in general has to deal with the technical aspect of playing. So are you technically proficient at observing your dynamics? So are they actually being observed as opposed to are they being interpreted? So that's where I think that you were kind of wanting to do more descriptive, I guess you wanted to go into it more into detail in box 3 for dynamics.
You can talk for 40 minutes about dynamics, but you're right. The question of box 2 it's a yes or no question.
Right. So it's just, are they hitting the mark?
Yeah.
Are they playing at a piano? Quotation marks. Are they playing at this dynamic level? Are they observing crescendos, diminuendos, whatever it is?
Yep.
So I think that's pretty much where that box 2 description of dynamics observed, that's where it falls into.
Exactly. Yeah, it does say dynamics observed, not the quality necessarily of dynamics, or however. But
are they technically there?
Are they technically there? Can
Was
you
he
tell?
loud?
Are they obvious?
He was loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, why is dynamics in the technique box? It's because playing dynamics is a technique, and it needs to be worked on, and it needs to be checked. And Andrew, when you were saying, is it obvious? What I tell my kids is, did you exaggerate your dynamics?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The metaphor I use is, you ever been to a play? You ever been to a musical? Think about how animated the actors are to get across their emotions, to get across what they're trying to express, but also their makeup and their costumes. Everything's exaggerated because if you're sitting all the way in the back of the auditorium, you have to be able to see their makeup, their facial expressions and stuff. But if you were to see them up close, you would see that they caked on the makeup and the costume design and whatnot. And that's because they want to make it very obvious to the audience, so they've exaggerated their expression. So that's my 2 cents on dynamics observed.
Topher, what you got?
So, Christian and AJ, I know you don't know a whole lot about my band program, but my top ensemble, I got 2 concert ensembles. My top ensemble this semester is 17 kids, which is the smallest I've ever had. So dynamics observed is something we work on daily. And kind of like what you were saying, Andrew, yes, this definitely in this documentation is a yes or no. Did you observe dynamics? And it's interesting how the different size of the ensemble can impact So I do a lot of recording in class. We just got a grant, so I have a high-quality video and audio recording device, even though I wasn't able to use it today for this podcast. And the kids will listen back to the recording and go, oh, yeah, no, we didn't really get to piano there. I don't use the numbering system, though I'm familiar with it. I used that myself in high school. I typically tell the kids that double, triple piano is as soft as you can play with a good sound, and triple forte is as loud as you can play with a good sound. Somebody once said, never play louder than lovely. That was Dr. Sean Murray. And then somebody else, I can't remember who this one was, told me never softer than solid. And so I use those two things with the kids a lot. Is never play louder than you could play lovely. Never play softer than you can play solid. And that really helps a lot.
Yeah, the one thing that's just to add as a bookend, and then we can move to the final caption. I teach the numbering system in beginning band, but even in beginning band, when we start getting into music and like really into music, I talk about dynamics is relative, which is where the obvious ties in, because if compared to piano, your forte is obviously forte, that is effective, and that is a yes. Dynamics are relative. If most of the pieces at mezzo forte, and then you have that one spot at piano, that better be a very obvious piano, otherwise it's not effective. So I talk, the scale is just to give them an idea of as we were talking about, AJ loves his visual aids, so that's like we were talking about that last week, and as we all do. But
these kids are looking at screens all day. They need to look at something.
But it's like, true. But it's I use that to kind of give them a visual aid of just where it should be. But once we really get into the meat of it, it's dynamics are relative. They're relative to each other. Piano in one section may be not the same piano in the next section. It just depends on where you're coming from and where you're going. Cotton Eye Joe.
Which takes us into the next thing.
That's right.
Go for it.
Which is transitions.
There it is.
So, and that itself was a good transition.
I'm so good. I'm just...
yeah, man. So, with transitions, I kind of like to tell my students, like you're reading a book, and you go from one chapter to the next, but instead of it stopping and then carrying into a new idea, it kind of just has to seamlessly mold. I mean, it depends on the piece that you're playing, but what I usually do in rehearsals where, I have the full group, I will have, we'll go from rehearsal number to rehearsal number, box to box, and then once we've gone through the whole piece, I will actually kind of put like halfway points and rehearse from the middle of one section to the middle of the next section. So that way we can work that transition. So just as we've rehearsed box to box, we rehearse middle of that section to the next middle of the section. I don't do it too often, but I do it when I do want to work on transitions. So that way, they can realize that transitions are extremely important. Because we as middle school band directors, at least, the kids are coming off of going through beginning band, reading one line at a time, and now they're getting into their second and third years where they're reading 70, 80 up to 100 measures of music, and sometimes even more. And so for me, the transitions, I have to tell them that it's moving from one idea or one concept to another concept, and explaining what those concepts are to them is extremely important in that process. So that way they understand, okay, so I'm going from this section to the next section. How do I need to change my technique from this style to the next style? And that kind of molds into the, box 3. But in terms of transitions, that's pretty much what I do and I tell the kids.
Okay.
When I was at Columbus State, we had Mallory Thompson for a conducting workshop.
The GOAT.
She rehearsed, she rehearsed her piece "Sleep," and I say her piece because she does that piece everywhere. She's kind of like her recording with her ensemble Northwestern is kind of the go-to for that piece. And we were working on "Sleep," and as we were rehearsing, she kept saying, "We're going to start here. Never pass up working or practicing a transition. So she never started at a rehearsal letter. She always started 1 or 2 measures before, or 1 or 2 beats before, or something like that. So it's really important to keep that in mind. If you have fermatas, if you have retardandos, if you have time changes, if you have tempo changes, key changes, it's always good to always practice those transitions when you can. That's all I've got.
Samson.
I would say with transitions, so that's something that my bands always struggle with, especially ask any marching band judge that has watched me in the last 4 or 5 years. Transitions are always my lowest score on the sheet. I think part of it too is, part of it too is understanding where we're going to, and I know it gets a little bit into box 3, but understanding what's the emotion, what's the technique, not just purely dynamics or key signature or technical versus lyrical, but understanding like emotion and intent behind it as well is going to be a big thing. And so I typically ask the kids like, all right, so we just finished off this phrase. Now we're on this, 12, 16 bar phrase. What's the difference between the two besides the fact that the melody's different? How do these two things differ? And then how do we bridge the gap between them? It's definitely conversations you need to have with your kids.
It's almost like transitions to maybe be in box 3. Maybe that's why it's last in box 2, because it.
I disagree, and I'll tell you why.
Because you're a dumb.
Yeah. Oh God.
Just kidding.
So the analogy that I use for transitions, because what I say is transitions and thinking about. Well, first off, in order to do a transition, all you got to do is be thinking about it, because your body does what your brain tells it to. I equate it to driving a car, because research shows that majority of your thought when you're driving goes into when you're changing directions or changing speeds or changing lanes. When things change is when your brain is most active, when you're driving. And typically I tell the kids, when you're driving, you need to be thinking about the move before you make it. So you need to be aware enough and awake enough to anticipate what's coming, so that way you can just make the change effectively. And then obviously practicing the change, whatever the change is reps and getting them to getting that, automation happening. But I tell them, even if you understand how to do it, if you're not thinking about changing lanes, you're going to miss your exit, and you're going to miss it's not going to work. You're going to hit somebody. You have to be thinking about what you do before you do it.
You're going to die.
And the reason why I disagree with you, Christian, on that point is because everything in box 2 is a yes or no question. Are you playing the right notes? Yes or no. Are you playing the right rhythms? Yes or no. Are you precise? Yes or no. Is your technique effective? Yes or no. Are your transitions clean? Yes or no. And it's a yes or no question. Practicing it is from what all the 4 of us have talked about, different ways to do it. But I use the car analogy, and I tell them it's a yes or no question. You either hit it or you didn't. So pay attention to what you're doing before you do it, and you'll make it in time. But yeah, that's my thing.
Just to bounce off of that, I agree with both points.
Yeah,
for
I like
sure. Going into box 3, just like a little bit. Phrasing is part of box 3, and I think phrasing plays into your transitions. So just like what Chris said about his, he talks about the phrases and talking about going from one to the next. You can say, are your transitions clean? But your phrase also has to be part of that. So is your phrase, moving through the next part, or is it clear that you're doing this to the next part? So
sure,
I agree with both parts.
I dig it.
Well, there's the end of box 2 for you guys. And next Fundies episode is going to be box 3, or at least part of it. And we'll transition into that next time. This has been the Florida Band Podcast. Thank you for listening. And until next time, guys, take care. Be well.
Bye.
See ya.
All right.
Chris, say bye.
Bye.
Okay. See ya.